Okay. So yeah, just a bit of background first, just to explain what we believe feasibility is, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And apologies for anyone on the call that this is teaching you to suck eggs. This is just to basically lay some framework as to the sort of business requirements, if you like, of how the system's been developed. So in our terminology, in UniPhi's world, feasibility means cost-benefit analysis based around net present value and IRR. Within it, obviously, it's a forecast, which means you're crystal ball gazing into the future and making some assumptions. And I think it's important to emphasize the fact that it is a guess, it's an estimate into the future. The term present value comes from the phrase discount rate, bringing it back to what that investment is worth today. And the other bit about this feasibility is that it's a passive investment. So I'm going to go through each one of those items now and give you our view of the world on them. So to do a net present value calculation, what you need to define is the benefits of your investment. It doesn't necessarily mean revenue. In our case today, it's going to be focused on revenue-based benefits. But if you're a PMO, and you're looking at, say, IT system implementation, I don't know, like a product called UniPhi, and you're looking at productivity savings, then that would be a cost reduction, and the benefit would be based around cost reduction savings rather than revenue. But any new product development is going to have some sort of revenue model, and that would be your benefits. The investment and the ongoing maintenance of that investment is the costs year by year. So we need to forecast out those two. The net, in the net present value, comes from subtracting from the benefits the costs. And so subtracting year by year the costs from the benefits gets us the net, but that's at the nominal value it's going to be in the future. We know that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow because of inflation, and because of the risk return aspect of what the people giving us, or the company giving us the money to do this investment want. And so we need to apply a discount rate to those future cash flows that we're going to get and sum that value up to get us a value that's worth today. Anything greater than zero is something worth exploring and potentially investing in. Anything less than zero is looking a little bit dodgy and is potentially not going to occur. So basically there's our decision-making tool. It's a support tool, it's not definitive, and it has issues. It's like democracy, it's the best we've got. And if we can come up with something else, it's the best we can use for those decisions. And that's what I just described as a formula. The sigma is sum, so we sum up all the benefits minus the costs over time, and we discount those by a discount rate for those years as well. It's a fairly simple method. That's all automated in UniPhi now, so you don't need to worry too much about that. But to be able to explain the number, to remove the black box, it's probably worth understanding what it is that you're seeing when the number is positive or negative, and how those numbers come about. So it's relatively important to understand the formula, even though you don't need to do the maths yourself. IRR, it's fairly simple. It's the exact same methodology. It just changes the discount rate until net present value equals zero. So it gives you a percentage, and executives love percentage. So when you tell them that the NPV is $525,000 positive, that doesn't really mean much to them. But when you tell them it's a 20% return on investment, it does, and hence IRR is used. It's more flawed than NPV. It has issues with it, but it's still better than payback or other return on investment methods, and hence it's not a bad one to at least manage stakeholders by, for giving them that. UniPhi will calculate both the net present value and the IRR for the project. Obviously, to get those numbers, we have to forecast. And my mother told me never assume, otherwise it makes something bad out of me. So that can't be right. Well, it is. And the main emphasis there is that people kind of vest a lot of information and a lot of value and passion into their models. But it is an assumption. It will be wrong. It's a guide, and even understanding the variability around how wrong you could be is of value. It's of an enormous value in decision-making processes. But I often see people then thinking that's the number, that's what's going to happen, and obviously that's not the case. So it's important to remember that and not expect UniPhi going to give you the answer as whether you invest or not. It's all based on your assumptions. Another thing that sort of gets discussed and dismissed is, the discount rate just gets slotted in for every investment, but it should be assessed. it does represent the risk of your investment, and you should be assessing whether this particular investment is more riskier than your current business and whether that discount rate needs to be changed. It's typically just the one rate given to you by finance. It should be challenged more. And, you know, the rate of return and the discount rate applied to cash flows is crucial and will affect the answer. And if you're going to compare a less risky project with a more risky project, you need to be changing your discount rates. And that's because people forget, I think, this graph. You might want a really high return, which is that red line at the top, but the possibility of that return is far riskier than something with a lower return, and that's just the way it is. That's never going to change. It's the volatility behind a risky investment is always going to be there, and you could lose just as much as you might gain in a risky one. So to handle that, we need to assess the risk, and we need to come up with a methodology for changing discount rates. UniPhi is not going to do that for you, and you can get some answers in here and look at portfolio. The portfolio capability of UniPhi is significant, looking across projects at NPVs and potentially making bad decisions. So there's some risk in rolling this stuff out, basically. Not quite as much risk as just investing on gut feel, but you know, sometimes entrepreneurs are better at their gut feel than they are at finance people imagining money. The other negative, as I mentioned, it's like democracy, it's the best we've got. It is a passive tool. And so management can make decisions, and the angry manager in this is saying that, you know, time's up. Even if it's about to pay back in spades, they can cancel the project. They instead could double down on the project and invest even more. They could change the scope. There's a whole range of things that people can do on a day-to-day basis, whereas what we're doing is one point in time, one assessment at that point in time, assuming you do nothing else after you make that one decision. So in other words, we're going to invest, we're going to build a new building, a commercial building, we're going to sell the spaces in that building, and no matter what happens between now and then, it's going to be a 40-story building with this much floor area to rent and at this market rate, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to cost this much. That doesn't change. Now, you can create as many models as you like and many scenarios as you like. That starts to provide some background to the volatility and to what could change with different management decisions, but ultimately, you make a decision, it's a passive decision, you're buying and holding, and you know, that's a misrepresentation of the world. So it's an important thing to keep in mind as well. And finally, with regards to the UniPhi application, it doesn't come with financial models. It's a blank canvas. It's a platform for building them. You need to build the model. And this webinar is our first presentation on what capability is in there to go about building that model. But ultimately, it'll be your model. It'll be your way of estimating benefits and estimating costs. And that will be different to the other UniPhi user and the next UniPhi user and the next UniPhi user. We can assist and provide guidance in how to build these models for different types of assets and different types of investments. But ultimately, you're in control. It's like launching a blank Excel spreadsheet. You need to put the formulas in. You need to build the model. What we've provided is a platform for doing that. Okay, that's my little rant about the assumptions behind it. Let's get into the interesting stuff. So here we are in a demo UniPhi deployment, and I'm going to take you through two examples. One's very simple and one a little bit more complicated to demonstrate the concepts. You'll be using the revenue and costs modules as per the presentation there, as well as the drilled in summary view of a project. Within those, you'll be using some of the new functionality that comes in the configuration. I'm going to go to the configuration section last because it's the more complicated bit, but I'll just show the utilization of that configuration first. Now, we have created a couple of examples. So the first example is an investor wanting to acquire some land and put some, you know, maybe 4 stories residential apartment on that piece of land, and they're looking at the return that they might get from that. So the first step is to create the project in UniPhi, and once you've created the project, you will be in this summary screen that most of you will be familiar with that has the ability to classify what it is and various other things. You'll see over on the right-hand side here, NPV and IRR. So that's the sort of first bit. That's been around for a little while, but this expansion is around the metrics and around the modeling of that. So you need to tell us what chart of accounts you're using for your model. So we've got FISO revenue and FISO costs. You can click that and there'll be others there for you to choose from. And then you need to key in your discount rate, which I talked about before as being an assessment of risk, what return you want. And as I scroll down, you'll see that one of the things that will come in is, feasibility. Now, these are project custom fields, so they don't exist. If someone came and bought a fresh UniPhi deployment today, those custom fields wouldn't exist. It's up to you to decide what you're going to do to capture the sort of the variables, the assumptions that you're going to put in. As you can see in here, the occupancy rate. This is a feasibility of the rent. It turns out for this, for a basic assessment, when you're just basically building a building and selling what's inside it, you really don't need any of this stuff. You can jump straight to the revenue module and key everything that you need in there. So this one that I'm looking at the moment doesn't have any variables to key in. But if I was to select the other one, I think it was affordable housing. There we go. So in this scenario, the investment is similar. We're going to buy a block of land and put a bunch of units on it, but this time we're going to rent them out. We're going to maintain ownership and rent them out. And so when I come down to the feasibility, you can see that the project custom fields are being keyed in. And so we've got an occupancy rate of 90% over the life of the investment. The investment duration we expect is 20 years. We've got 20 one-bedroom apartments. We've got 40 two-bedroom apartments. We're going to rent them out at $450 per week for one bedroom and $650 per week for two bedroom. So they're the assumptions that we've put in. So the idea in this platform is that you build your framework, you build the assumptions that people key in. You may even have an Excel spreadsheet already that has that. You replicate that in UniPhi, or everything that's just a basic data entry, not a formula. And then you use the metrics engine to build the formulas that time. So, for example, the number of weeks in a year by the rent, by the number of apartments. You build those formulas up and you apply them into the revenue and cost modules. So you could expand this to include a one-level variable for the construction cost, and then percentages that you're going to use to derive the other costs on that. So, for example, a $5 million building with 10% consulting costs and 5% FF&E and 10% contingency. All of those custom fields could be keyed in here, and then they'll automatically calculate and flow through to the revenue and cost module, which is what we're going to look at now. So firstly, I'm going to go back to our residential apartments. So there was actually nothing to key in here on that one. All we need to do is jump to the revenue. We need to select our chart of accounts, which is FISO revenue. Go to our budget. And because it's a really basic concept, you would literally just use the volume and rate interface that exists already in UniPhi. So in this particular scenario, we're building 20 one-bedroom units, 22 bedroom units, and 10 three-bedroom units and one penthouse. We've given them our expected rates, and one times the other gives us a total budget. Now, the reason we did this simple one is because that's the methodology UniPhi uses, which is a little bit different to the spreadsheet models that you're probably using now, in that it does a whole of life calculation first. So it's not a month by month or year by year build up. It's what are we going to have whole of life value for this thing. And once you've got the whole of life, you then phase that out over time. So that's a different methodology, a pretty significant difference to the traditional. And it's basically been derived out of the fact that that's how UniPhi has always captured estimates. Quantity surveyors build an estimate for an investment, they build a whole of life estimate, and then you phase that out over time rather than the other way around. So once we've got this total, we need to phase it into the expectation of how we think that's going to fall out over time. Similarly, on the cost side as well. And so build up that budget, then you click on the phasing. And it's in the auto phasing that there's new functionality around that. I'm just going to, before I get into the phasing though, I'm just going to show you within this screen the difference between this very simple little revenue model here and the one that comes from a little bit more complicated, where you're going to buy and own the asset, rent it out, in this instance, the affordable housing model. So I've just jumped into the affordable housing. I'm still in revenue budget. I'm still in the same chart of accounts because we're still selling 1 and 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom, in this instance only 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. And this could be anything. So, you know, we've modeled this on, you know, product developments like, you know, new cars. You can model it on, you know, aged care facilities, whatever you're selling. But what you'll see here down here is a calculation has been made. So what's happened is UniPhi's taken the data that we keyed in on the summary page that I showed you before, and it's looked at the occupancy that you gave it and the per unit rates and the number of 1 bedrooms that you're going to use and how long the investment is going for, and it's calculated a total value for the entire investment for renting a 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom apartment, or the total for that particular investment. Then what happens is, for each of these codes, we derive whatever's in the metrics down here into the model. So if I click this little drilling here, you'll see that it's got derived 100% of the 1 bedroom rent. So if I go back and change the variables back in the summary tab, remember it was 8 odd million. If I say actually we've changed the scope as management can do, and we're now only going to build 10 1 bedrooms and say 35 2 bedroom apartments, and I hit save, that will instantly update the model. And so when I click back into the revenue module, those numbers have changed. It was 8 million before, it's now 4.2 and 21. And so, and everything's flowing through. So those numbers change, and because this is deriving from those numbers, it updates. And so you're able to model based off those assumptions directly back into here. What doesn't automatically update, you need to review, is the phasing of that information. But if I go to the phasing screen, and that's still a conundrum of whether we do that or not. Sorry, I shouldn't have clicked there. So I'm in the phasing screen now. You can see that the model is phased out month by month. You can see the budget total 4.2 is different to 8.42, which was the original phasing for this project, same with 21 versus 24. So we need to update that phasing. It doesn't happen automatically, and that still juries out on whether we want that daisy chain. The reason is that when you look at the auto phasing, which I'm about to go to now, the auto phasing is all based on dates. And you can see here that there's code relationships between construction dates, which is going to come from the cost module, and the revenue, because obviously you can't rent a room that doesn't exist. So basically what it's doing is it's saying when construction has finished, we're going to have sold off the plan. It was a totally, you know, bullish assumption, but we're sold off the plan. Otherwise, you would adjust in months how long you think, or you could create a ramp-up phase and have it come in, you know, a certain number of units per month. That's all possible within this modelling. You're going to instantly have everyone move in as soon as the construction phase is finished. So what we're thinking is people should review this every time they've updated their assumptions, because it may be that the dates need to change. And you can link it to life cycle dates as well, and therefore just change the life cycle dates, and that flows through into this automatic phasing. But essentially, this is where the month-by-month figures are going to come from. And so the 204 duration is the 20 years of investment minus the time it takes to build the facility. And so from the 1st of August 2020 to the 31st of July 2037, we're going to rent this. And that's how the 4.2 and the 21 got calculated. So it divides those numbers into the 204. And when we hit save, it calculates an updated phasing, which is now 0, as you can see, for the budget line. NPV on the summary screen is calculated on forecast. So you can see what actual forecast here, and then we've got budget. So there's 2 scenarios already. If we want to update the NPV, we need to copy the budget, and then we can go to our summary screen and save that. And if we scroll down, our NPV has been updated to $245,000. So that's basically saying we expect to make 10.4% return on that against a hurdle rate of 10. So it's a little bit better than what we need to jump over, if you like, in terms of the investor who's giving us the money. So that gives us a $245,000 positive MPV. The side of the equation I haven't analysed yet is the costs, but people are more familiar with that. Again, I need to select the right cost code, FISO costs. And so again, you can do this within the cost module, or you could derive everything from the metrics that you put onto the summary screen. But what we've got in here is a little FISO structure. We've purchased some land, we've got some construction costs, and what we've done after that is use the derivative function again to derive the other costs. So what's happened here is we've used benchmark data or whatever. We've got an early stage estimate from the QS, hence that number might be a bit different to 10 million. It's probably going to come in at $9,875,322.45 because they like to be precise. But we've got a number, and we're saying that our other costs are going to be related to that number. And so we've created these derivatives. So again, if I click on this little arrow, you'll see it will say 0.25% of the construction phase cost. And so similar to deriving it from metrics, you can also derive it from codes. And if I was to change, I've got a new and updated number from my quantity surveyor, and I hit save, all the other numbers update at the same time. And so again, when we go into the phasing of this particular project, now there's going to be a difference between the whole of budget estimate and what's been phased out over time. You can change the derivatives directly in the screen, or you can drill in and change it within the drill in screen. If I was to set up a new one, you can see FF&E hasn't got any because we're renting this, and so we're not going to put it fully furnished. We could create, we might be putting some kitchen appliances and things in there, and we could do a 2% of construction. So that's how the thing got set up in the first place. And that's now given us a budget line for FF&E. Now, again, when I go to the phasing screen, and I hit auto phase, you'll see a combination of relationships here. The land parcel relates to when the feasibility study finishes. So as soon as the feasibility study starts, then that's when we're going to buy the land. And so actually a few days ago. So that's phased out instantly. We're using our construction S-curve, and we're using our construction life cycle dates. So these dates aren't editable. They just basically come from the schedule that people have set up for the system. So you change the schedule, the dates change. And remember, we're using that date to decide when people move in, so that would have a knock-on effect on the revenue side of the equation that we looked at before. So it flows through quite quickly to all the different elements. Monthly consulting fees, we're linking to the different life cycle phases of the project. Again, scheduling those dates means that it'll automatically come up with the durations, and those phases will come, those 330,000 will be phased out over 6 months, 330 over 12. Marketing costs we're doing based off the construction phase only, so over 12 months, once we've gone, put a spade in the ground, we're going to start advertising and selling off the plan, and we're hoping to have them all sold by the time we go live. So you can see there's a synchronise between the construction phase end date and the marketing end date. They're all sold. Other costs, whatever they may be, and FF&E are in there too. Because FF&E is a new one, we'd need to build this up. Now, we're going to pay for all that right near the end of the project. So we might say monthly still, but we could link it to the construction code, similar to what we've done here. And so you would select that, and that gives you the date. So 1st of August, probably select the wrong type, I guess. Oh no, that's definitely wrong. Yes, definitely start to finish, but then go, okay, well that's no good because people have already moved in. What you can do is say, right, 3 months before they move in, we'll be, the shell will be there, and we're starting to fit out with whatever fixtures and equipment we're going to put into the place, and hence it'll then do that. But we need it to be done by the time they move in, so we've got 2 months to do that work, and then you've got yourself a phasing schedule there for that information to be phased. So now we're finishing on the 30th of June. People are moving in on the 1st of August. We've got 1 month contingency there, and we've used these dates. The benefit of having it auto is that any changes to this just flow through. So if I go and change the construction phase dates, for example, in the, which I'll do in a moment actually, but if I don't hit save, I won't update this cash flow. So going to hit save now. That does the calculations, takes me back to the screen where those numbers come in. If I was to go to the summary, there's a little schedule there. I could push out the date of construction by 1 month. Save. And of course, the date of the submission has gone too far. So I'm going to link dates now. I'm going to push out this 1 more month, so the 31st of August. That's the phase we're in at the moment. So everything else flows through. Doesn't like that one either. Getting there. And I'm going to copy my baseline over just so it's the same. And if I go back to my costs now and look at the auto phasing, we've got new dates, 1st of October 2020 coming in, new dates for the furniture and fixtures, all the other dates have updated as well. And I can hit save, and we've got a new cash flow. Now, for each of those scenarios, you can use the snapshotting function. So when you snapshot a budget, it doesn't just snapshot this whole of life budget, it snapshots the cash flow as well. And if you do snapshot it, you'll then have, so if we snapshot this at, say, business case, with a date, leave it, it's not approved yet. You then have that scenario. So you could have business case, fast track construction business case, 20-bed solution, 40-bed solution, and just label it correctly for your different scenarios. And then when you go to reports, which I'll show you in a moment, you'll be able to run the NPV on different scenarios. We're always showing in the interface the current version. So when I go to summary again now, and I hit save, you shouldn't have to hit save there, but eventually we'll remove that and just instantly update. Hang on a sec. It also does it, trick for young players, on the forecast, not the budget. We're going to have it optionally selected in the future, but I didn't copy the budget before when I rephased it, so I need to copy the budget. Now when I come here and hit save, we'll have an updated MPV. We're now in the red. So all of those assumption changes made our project worse, and we've now got a business case that doesn't really stack up. So that's how you would use the interface to do an assessment. Once you've built the model, so each model was different. There was an apartment model and a buy and rent model. They're two different models. For each model, if you build one up, you can then copy it to do multiple assessments of different blocks of land, different opportunities in different suburbs with different rental rates, what have you, different construction prices because of conditions on site, etc. But the actual lines and the model are the same. You're deriving the same sort of thing. You're going to derive your pre-construction amounts based off your construction amounts, all those sorts of things. All you'd need to do is copy the project, call it Affordable Housing 2, and tick budget, and all of those things come into the next to this project. I'll copy resources as well. It'll start off with the values of that particular one, but if you change the values, the calculations then update as you saw us do before. So that's the way you set up the model, is you set up a templated model, if you like, could have no values in it, but it's still deriving. So all the derivatives are there. So when I go to revenue and I go to budget, select the right chart of counts. You can see that's an aged care model where they have lovely little acronyms like DAPs and RADs and ILUs and RACs. So it's a completely different model again. Go to my FISO revenue, the derivatives are still there. Okay, so then you just need to say how much, which should be 100%, and your values start to update. Go and change your summary options for Affordable Housing 2, and all of this will update as well. So that's how you'd set up the model for repeatability. In terms of getting these values calculating correctly, this is where it gets a little bit more complex. In the configuration option of UniPhi, under the thing called costs, we're going to relabel that metrics because it includes both revenue and costs. You have this thing called metrics, and in there is a formula engine that enables you to calculate values. So if I go to the Feasibility revenue chart of accounts and I scroll down, you can see I've classified this as a rental model. And you can see here a formula that basically builds up that total value. So this is a once-off exercise, and then whenever you key in those summary figures, it's going to calculate it. So this dollar project means a project custom field. The project custom field is called 1 bedroom rent per week. There's obviously 52 weeks in the year. We've got how many? So that's the rate, that's the volume, the occupancy rate, the investment duration. So they're the things that people are keying in at the front screen, and then this is using a formula engine to calculate the total. And you can actually build as complex a formula as you can. In the aged care environment, it's quite unique to the point where we were using exponential algorithms to actually calculate the total. So that capability is there in the engine formula. You can do some pretty sophisticated calculations. This was, again, quite a simple model. So depending on what, so for example, if you were doing a productivity related project and you were expecting some sort of logarithmic improvement in productivity over time, once you put in a UniPhi application and you're getting 10 and 20 and 30% productivity savings, you could model that in this system and determine whether the productivity savings you're going to get on, say, 100 people doing projects is greater than the $55 a month they're paying for them to access the UniPhi application. So pretty much anything should be able to be modeled through these types of formulas. That's the only bit that you'd need on top of what we've shown so far. That's why when I go to the revenue screen for my affordable housing 2, I click on budget, those values there will come in. Of course, I haven't entered in anything for this particular model. So what I need to do is go to my summary screen, so this full circle back to where we started, scroll down to the label feasibility, put in my numbers, apartments, and it's a small one, this one, 500 and 750. I've keyed all that in. I hit save, go back to my revenue, budget, and it's calculated the values. And so now I can phase those values, auto phase, using the same model as before, selecting the links to the various life cycle phases, phase that out, and I've got myself a new NPV.